All right, and so from here on out, the video will be recorded. The presentation is being American Sign Language interpreted. If you cannot see Kara, our interpreter, you're able to click on her video and pin it to the top so that way you can see her in your screen even as we're talking and going through the slides today. So this year, the Lunch and Learn series is going to explore the legacy of CS and Ruth Mott at the Ruth Mott Foundation. We believe that CS is known as one of the founders of General Motors, but what really is special about CS and the Mott family as a whole is their commitment to civic participation. So while we can't be together in person, I do encourage you, grab a snack, grab your lunch, join me in today's discussion. We're gonna pretend that it's sunny and not rainy and gloomy out, and we're at Applewood in our beautiful covered seating area, enjoying the breeze and a little break from the heat today. I will be your presenter. My name is Ashley Ross, and I am the Assistant Manager of Collections and Education, which basically means I work with and protect all the historic objects at Applewood and help out with programs like these. My contact information is on the screen. If after today's presentation you have more questions or want to know something more specific, I'm available at the email and phone number listed. As well, Renee Saba, our Education and Events Coordinator, will be helping me throughout the presentation and making sure that we get through everyone's questions. Feel free in the chat box, ask a question as we go along. If something is really poignant to the slide and you want to ask right away, I will do my best to answer that right away. But we do have plenty of time at the end to go over any questions, any specifics that you may have. I know I already said it, but feel free to put questions in the chat box. I'll do my very best to answer. I might not go in order just because I know what order the slides are in, so I might answer at the next slide, but I will try to address everything. Today's topic is on preserving photos. In thinking about the Motts and civic participation, you might wonder, how does photo preservation tie in? And so first I'm going to say CS Mott saved everything. So here are some images of the third floor at Applewood. The entire third floor is dedicated storage space for the family's historic letters, documents, photographs, and we call all of this our archives. We have CS's daily diaries, family photographs, photo albums, videos, newspapers, holiday cards, important documents, and more, and it's now our job to take care of all of this. So photo preservation, or preservation of any of the stuff that I just mentioned, is an act that contributes to our collective history. Having these photos available and accessible to the community allows us to get a glimpse into our local history. And because of who CS was, it allows us to better understand the history of our nation, particularly the history of the automobile. So try to imagine how much information we have in the third floor at Applewood. Without CS saving these papers, a lot of information might have been lost to history. Here is a quick visual representation of what is contained in the archives at Applewood. At Applewood, we estimate that we have about 23,000 photographic archival documents, which does include photographs, negatives, digital photos, 35mm film, and nitrate film. And the Motts captured photos and videos in all sorts of settings. This includes formal, casual, artistic. We have various video footage and oftentimes silly images and videos as well. On the screen right now are a few of my personal photos from February. This year, it's February and March. So they show my daughter first at school with her teacher and a friend. The next one shows my daughter and I eating out at a restaurant. I think that one was from March. And then the last one is us having a picnic, my kids with their cousins from out of state. What I didn't know at the time is that these images are actually representative of a pre-COVID time. I do have a question really quick before I go any further. Is everyone seeing the slides okay? Okay. I just want to double check because my computer did something wonky. All right. So these images are representative of pre-COVID, and I'm sure you all probably have similar photos, maybe in your phone. Our images that we take today don't look like the images that we took a couple months ago. So your personal photographs in the future might provide insight into what daily life was like in Flint, or what life was like during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. You know, for New Year's Eve this past year, did you take a photo? How different does that look than a photo you might take today? Did you post your stuff on Facebook or another social media platform? Did you attend a party inside? So your images may shine a light on social history and more intimate moments of something like the water crisis or celebrations of holidays and rites of passage. I know in my own personal collection, I have photos of my grandpa in World War II in the Army Air Corps. And those photos tell a story about my family, but also about the whole nation. And the photos in the Applewood collection do the same thing. They tell a story of a family who loved each other, a family who was silly and who enjoyed their time living in Flint, a family who was generous with their good fortune. They captured hobbies and moments of relaxation. And then I want to show you a video. They captured moments in times that were critical in world development. This video is from our archives. The photos I just shared on the screen and this video of CS are all demonstrative of some of the archival items we have in the collection. This clip shows CS having fun, and the last bit actually shows CS on one of his many road trips that he would take in his GM cars, trying to perfect the automobile. So today we'll discover some tools and tips so you can do your own civic duty in preserving your family's and the nation's history. Before we get too far into it though, I would love to know a little bit more about who is here today. And so I'm going to ask a question. Have you been to Applewood before? Should be popping up on your screen here shortly. Excellent. So there's actually a pretty good split. It looks like most of you have been here, but some of you haven't. I do encourage you to come check us out next year, but we run programs like these all the time. So we do our Lunch and Learn series once a month. We have story time frequently. This just helps me, let's see, I'm sharing that with you. This helps me understand who's here. And so if I say something that you're not familiar with, I can always clarify. Please don't hesitate to ask. All right. So on the screen, you're going to see an outline of what we're going to go over today. This includes risk factors to your photos, how to handle your photos, steps for preservation, and how to store your photos. I will very briefly talk about the science in storing your photos, and then I will discuss how to display your photos safely and what to do with your digital photos. At the end, like I said before, we're going to have a lot of time for Q&A. As I go through the presentation, again, please remember, feel free to ask questions. All right. Risk factors. So first, it's important to understand that photographs by their very nature and chemical makeup are not made to last forever. However, there are a lot of things we can do to lengthen the lifespan of a photograph. It's important to understand the things that can cause damage to photos. Those include temperature, humidity, light, dirt, grease on your hands, overhandling your photos. All of these can potentially do harm. I'm sure you've all seen how colors fade in old photographs or how the edges curl up. My first warning of the day, do not be tempted to repair your own photos. I've been working in museum collections for 15 years, and even I do not have the expertise to repair a photo. Once you glue or tape a photo back together, there is really nothing that you can do to remove those materials. So it's best just to keep any damaged parts all together in an acid-free envelope or in an appropriate photograph holder. Another thing I'd like to bring up is lamination. And while it might seem like a good way to protect a document or a photograph because of the heat required to laminate, as well as the fact that it's irreversible, it essentially ruins the document or photographs. On the bottom of this slide, you will see a link. Several of the slides throughout the presentation do have links for you, and those will provide more in-depth information if you want on the topics that we're going over, as well as some materials you can use too. All right, storage tips. So light damage is probably the most common thing that damages photos. Once a photo fades, there really is no returning it back to its original. And because of this, if you can do nothing else, be sure that your photographs that are important to you are stored away from light, especially sunlight. Many of us store our photographs in a place such as a basement or an attic. And the second most important thing you can do for your photos is to get them out of those rooms. The temperature and humidity fluctuations are just too much in those types of spaces. Additionally, basements are prone to flooding. Once water gets onto an image, there is just not a whole lot that can be done. Professional archives typically store photos in cool rooms with relative humidities between 30 and 40%. I do realize this is a lot easier said than done. And at Applewood, we actually do use our basement and our third floor spaces for storage. Now, luckily for us, our basement is one of the most environmentally stable spaces in our house. And the third floor, we do have portable heating and cooling units in many of the rooms, along with some massive humidifiers to stabilize the environment year round. At your own home, if you keep items on a first floor and have a comfortable interior most of the year, you don't really need to worry too much about climate control. Ideally, you would want to store your photographs in a box made from acid-free cardboard, and a simple Google search for archival photo options should yield many good results. When shopping, it should say acid-free. If it doesn't, don't buy it. So I did a Google search for acid-free materials and a lot came up, but many of those were not actually acid-free. So when you go to purchase, make sure it's very clearly labeled. Yes. Storing photos. For individual photos, it's best to use a safe plastic cover for each of your photographs. I prefer covers that are open on 2 or 3 slides. Pocket holders that are only open on one side, you have to actually force the image in, and oftentimes the corners get bent. You're trying to push it in, put pressure. It could cause tearing and ripping. Overall, when you're storing your photos, minimal light exposure is important. Less is better, none is best. Keep away from radiators and vents, avoid pollutants, and don't store photos in places where you have cleaning supplies or solutions. When handling photos, there's a few basic rules to help keep your photographs safe. First, make sure you have clean hands. Oils from your hands can be very damaging to photographs, especially the front of them. If possible, wear gloves, but I also encourage you to weigh the benefits of wearing and not wearing gloves. Sometimes older photographs are difficult to handle when wearing a cotton glove. Right now, access to nitrile gloves might be limited just based on COVID-19. So my best advice, if you can't get some really nice fitting archival gloves, is to wash your hands thoroughly and handle your photo from the back. You can also hold it by its sides depending on what type of photo you have. Or a lot of times if we're dealing with a fragile photo, we'll slide the photo onto a piece of board and move the board instead of actually touching the photo. Make sure you have a clean workspace. You do not want food and beverage around. Accidents happen all the time, so just ensure that you're working in a clean, dry space when you're handling your photos that you really care about. Once your photos are stored safely, or as you're working on storing them safely, it's important to gather all the W's about each photo: who, what, where, when, why. And I know this information seems obvious, especially if it's a photograph you just took, but years from now, it will not be so easy to remember. And you'll be glad you took the time to write it all down. I know personally and professionally, I've run into this situation where I cannot identify people or places in the images. So do the best you can until you find out more information. And it's always okay to say something like such and such a year, for example, it was about 1990, and that at least gives you a general time frame. You might be able to narrow it down later on, but provide the information that you can when you have it. Labeling photos. So with the information that you just gathered, all of those W's, you'll want to label your photos. There are different ways to do this. The first thing we do in museums is assign each photograph a number, and then we store that information in a digital database, whether that be something simple like an Excel spreadsheet or something a little more advanced. We use Past Perfect, which is commonly used in smaller history museums and historical societies. For home use, it's best to place the information directly on photo sleeves. Polypropylene is a very common material for these covers and is safe for photographs. Once you have a photo in your poly cover, you can put a plain white mailing label on the poly, not on the photo, and you can write the information on the label. Do this before you insert the photo into the poly so that you don't accidentally damage the photo by writing too hard. The cover creates a barrier, so the photo isn't in direct contact with the sticky label, but all of the information is there. If you don't have access to poly covers, the next best thing is to write it on the back of the photo with a pencil or an archival pen. Archival pens are permanent, but they're non-damaging and they're non-acidic, and they also don't fade. Never ever write on the front, and be sure not to press too hard when writing. If you've already done those things, I think we've all probably made those mistakes. That's okay. Just going forward, try to follow these. And then I did want to point out, sorry, I went too fast. There is a link at the bottom of this slide as well where it shows you can get those types of materials I just talked about. So now we're going to briefly get into digitization. And the first thing you'll want to do is to digitize your paper or hard copy photograph. This is truly the only way to make sure that your images live on forever. There are a handful of ways to digitize your photos. There are companies out there that will do this for you, but if you are looking to do this yourself, and I encourage you to do so, here are some guidelines. The very best option is to get a large scale flatbed scanner, and that's the image that you see on the left of your screen. Because you'll be able to make sure the image is flat at all times, there's very low risk in doing any damage to your photos with this type of scanner. But this option is time consuming and it can be expensive to start up. So small flatbed scanners start at around $75 to $100. You can only do one image at a time, so it's labor intensive, especially if you have a lot of photos to scan. So the next option is actually what I use at home. We have what's called a ScanSnap scanner. It's not a flatbed scanner, so your photos will experience tension because they're gonna run through a machine. However, you can do a lot of photos at one time, and if your photos are in relatively good shape, the risk of damage remains pretty low, but again, it is not as low and not as safe as a flatbed scanner. So it's really looking at what you have, what's in your collection, and making that determination on what's best for you. If you have images that are deteriorating or in bad shape, do not use a scanner that pulls the images through. If you have a lot of photos in good shape, this is excellent to do at home. I think we just did the math. We have like 35,000 photos digitized at home. And really the time spent doing it was minimal in the long run, just a few hours as opposed to doing one at a time. but they are more expensive. You're looking at about $200 to $400 range for this type of scanner. The most inexpensive option is actually using your camera or cell phone to take a photo or a scan of your photo. And this is just fine if this is the only option available to you. When scanning the photos, make sure to capture the image in its entirety. This is for any type of method. Do not crop out the white parts of a photo, like a Polaroid, for example. You can always go back and crop photos and get to the spot that you want later on, but you can never add that part back if you didn't take it in the first place. When doing the digitization, you want to get your resolution as high as possible. It is best to start at least at 300 dpi, but even bigger is better. So it's the same thing or the same principle I said before. You can always go back and compress an image, make it smaller, but you can never make it bigger. And when you are scanning and digitizing, you are experiencing light on your photo. So we don't want to keep going back and doing it over and over again. Do it once, do it high res, you know, make it big, have the whole image, and then you have that image forever. Now, when you're saving the file, you should name it something that not only makes sense to you, but that someone else could understand what the image would be too. Do not save photos directly to your computer. If it's your only option, yes, you can do it, but ideally you're taking these scans at a high res capacity. So if you save a lot of photos to your computer, it's going to bog down your computer. And as computers regularly outdate themselves, this will significantly slow it down. It's not the safest way to store them. I really recommend saving your files to external hard drives, flash drives, or even to cloud storage. So at Applewood, we digitize our images, and then we group images into folders. So we do approximately 15 images per folder, but this varies based on the size of an image. And I'm talking physical photographs right now. If we can store more, we can. If we can't, that's okay. We then label the tab at the top of the folder to identify what's in that folder. So you could go in, we have approximately 10 to 20 different images in the folder, the label up top, and then we can fit 10 to 20 folders into one archival box, and then we label the outside of the box. So the links previously shared also cover those archival storage elements that I talked about. And we do this, so, images in a folder, in a box, and everything is labeled. We do this because we rarely access our originals to be sure we keep them safe. If we do need to access them, we know without rifling through all of the folders, all of the boxes, opening up every box, exactly where all of our images are located. Another option for you to store your images is in photo albums, because you might actually want to flip through your photos more frequently or show them to family and friends. That being said, you would be limited once again to tighter pockets. So when you are, pushing your images in, you do run that risk of damage. Usually the photo albums I see only open on one side. The information is usually written on the side or below in a photo album, and you would still use an archival pen. Once the photo album had photos in it, there's also photo album boxes that you could store the album in, and that just helps protect it a little bit longer as well. Once again, label the box so you know what photo album is in there. Okay, so I'm going to cruise through the next few slides, but I wanted to include them in case anyone had further questions. It gets pretty sciencey. We've already talked about acid-free, but ideally you would want lignin-free and PVC emission-free materials, and those two can all be found at the links provided earlier. All right, in most instances, you are not going to have to worry about buffered or unbuffered. This relates to the chemical makeup and pH levels of papers and materials that we would use to store. You will see that buffered is best for prints that have been mounted onto poor quality secondary supports. You would use this if you have photos that have a backing glued onto them, if somebody previously did try to repair in another way, or if you're using film-based negatives. Unbuffered would be used for more recent contemporary photos. Most of what you would probably have in your home collection would be just fine. So if you see it, and you might, it's about the pH balance. Earlier I said to use polypropylene covers, but the 4 types of plastics listed on the screen are all pretty much suitable for photo storage. Some photos lend better to others, but this is really getting into the weeds. So you would still be safe with polypropylene or polyethylene in a majority of the instances. A reminder that if you're storing photos in high humidity conditions, this is still plastic and will cause sticking. Don't use plastic to store things like glass plates, nitrate film, or acetate-based negatives. These would be better suited in their own boxes or their own folders.
Ashley, we have a quick question just to clarify a little bit more before we get on to the other topics. But why is it important to have materials that are acid-free or lignin-free or those different types of frees?
Yes, so that's a very good question. Thank you for asking that, and thanks for stopping me. You want the acid-free, the lignin-free, all of those things. Regular materials that you could just go and pick up off the shelf, you know, at your local pharmacy tend to off-gas. And so what that's going to do is you might think you're saving your photos, but it could actually deteriorate them even faster. Especially if something like a plastic is new and it's not acid-free, or it's not one of those things that we just went over, it's going to break down your photograph even faster and or stick to it. You won't be able to peel them apart. It really causes more damage than good. I encourage you, I actually did this not too long ago at home. We were moving, and so I was looking back on some of my photo albums from being a little girl, and the images that I put in those photo albums that I thought I was protecting are in worse shape than the ones that I just let be free in a container. So that's why we want to really focus on that, is it's actually going to speed up the process for you, the deterioration. Photos, just based on what they are made out of, will deteriorate. It's going to happen. The goal is that we can keep them safe for hundreds and hundreds of years, but they do have a life expectancy on them. So the more you store them in appropriate materials, the longer they'll last for you. Please feel free, keep coming in with the questions. So let's keep going, but feel free to interrupt. Some film, like nitrate film, is combustible. Because of this, if you know you have nitrate film at home, it is actually recommended to digitize your nitrate film and then discard of it. This is actually easier said than done. Because the film is so unstable and potentially could catch fire, it is spontaneously combustible. It should be taken to your local fire department for disposal. At Applewood, we do have nitrate film. It's mostly been digitized. And what we do is we actually store it in a freezer. Now this counteracts the decomposition and helps keep it in a stable state. This should not be done at home, especially not just in your regular everyday freezer. The opening and closing of your freezer on a regular basis will actually destabilize the film even more and can cause some serious issues. Your local fire department will know how to handle it. I recommend giving them a call before stopping by, but that's your best bet. Digitize and take it to the fire department. All right, so we've talked a lot about storage and preservation, but a big question is, what if I actually want to see my photos? I took them because I want to see what's in them. So as discussed earlier, the best way to preserve photos is to digitize them. And from there, I actually recommend you print out a new version of your photo. Keep the original stored away, but display the new print. We did this in the sunroom at Applewood in 2017. The images were fading. We did it for their own safety. You can imagine a sunroom gets a lot of sun, and the original photos were fading fast. When we went to reprint, we were actually even able to resaturate some of those photos. So we brought some of the colors back. We couldn't get all of it, like I said earlier. light damage, once it's gone, it's usually gone, but we were able to use technology to pull some of it back out. And we actually, the copies are more vibrant than the originals are in our storage. So then we used museum glass. We put the copies back in their frames, used museum glass or plexi that have UV light filters to prevent further fading. Even though they're copies, we still want them to last for a while so we can enjoy them. Now, putting your photos in museum glass is not actually a permanent solution. Glass and plexi and UV filters, they do have about a 20-year lifespan before it does need to be replaced. Different companies, different types can last longer or shorter, so just keep an eye out on that. If it says a lifetime guarantee, really, check it out. What does that mean? Does it mean that they'll replace it after 20 years for you? Or does it genuinely mean like, oh, this is good for 50 years or whatever it might be? So a newer cool option is using digital photo frames. So all of the images that you just scanned in your preservation efforts can be sent directly to a photo frame. I even know that there's some new companies and frames out there that you can send an image to the frame directly from your phone. So you could give, grandma, aunt, sister, mom for Mother's Day one of these photo frames, and you can go in and upload new photos of the grandkids, even if you're living at a distance. And I think that's a really nice way to share the photos and see them as well. All right, last little bit here. Digitizing is the best tool we have for keeping records permanently. That being said, even your digital photos are going to need some TLC. So you have probably experienced this before, but have you ever tried to open a file and got an error message saying the file was corrupt or you could not open it? Or you tried to open it and it was pixelated and fuzzy? Yes, I see some people nodding their heads. So this is called bit rot or data decay, and it comes from opening files and it comes from not opening files or not updating your file type regularly. The best way to avoid this is to schedule and open each one of your files about once per year. It will allow you to keep the data current, and typically when you go to save it, it will ask you to update to the new file type. So how many versions of Word have you had over time? When you go to save, do you want to update this to a newer version? And yes, you do when it comes to photos. When you originally save your files, so after you scanned them, you're saving them into your computer, photos are best stored as TIFF or PNG files. Both of those types of photos are relatively stable. JPEG photos tend to be the most common when you're saving stuff, but they actually, every time you open a JPEG, it's metadata, that information that's in your photo deteriorates digitally. So it's not the best way if you want to save that photo for a long time. You don't want to save it as a JPEG, TIFF, or PNG. A newer way to save files is with what's called a PDF-A. The A stands for archive. So it will look exactly like a PDF file. So you have your photo, you save it as a PDF. It will look just like you would if you saved it as a TIFF or a PNG. But the A part of that archive part of it, will let you keep a PDF file look exactly the same, but the metadata in it, so all of that information that's in a digital image, will stay exactly the same and nothing will change. So that JPEG changes a lot. Others change a lot as updates come along. PDF-A is supposed to keep everything in stasis forever, as long as PDFs exist. So I will say, I don't know what the future holds, but the idea is that, you would have your PDF, as long as PDF, Adobe, Acrobat, all of those are still remaining, you would be able to open that image forever. And then the link at the bottom goes over exactly how to save your images as a PDF-A. It goes into detail. I don't want to do that here, but it's all there for you. That's really recommended. The only warning I would say is if for some reason Adobe does go out of fashion, you would then want to save it in whatever the newest version is. But if you're going back and saving your photos, opening them once a year, saving them, you'll be pretty up to speed on what's happening. So, all right. We are at Q&A. What I'm going to do, I'm going to move everyone over here. And I think, let me correct, I think I can unmute everyone. All right. So I've unmuted you. If you have questions, Renee, is there any questions in the chat box that I've missed along the way?
Yeah, I was able to give a partial answer to one question, but I think you could expand on it some more about what is the best way to preserve and access slides and Kodachrome transparencies. So
that's a tough one. So let me see. I'm going to write it down. Who was the person that asked that? Is that in the chat box? Because I think our another staff member would be able to answer that better. And so if I could get the email address for that person, we could answer that more specifically. I don't know that off the top of my head.
All right, and we were able to say that the type of material that we use to store the slides at Applewood, but yeah, we'll get some more detail in there as well.
Sorry about that.
And then on another question is, how stable are images that are taken in a raw format?
I guess it varies. I would say all of these are it would be pretty unstable, but if you're storing it properly, you're going to still get a pretty decent lifespan on it. Definitely digitize though. The sooner the better in all of those instances. Excellent. Any other questions, specifics? Something you have that you're not sure what to do with? All right, so once this is all recorded and sent out, the slides I'm sure will be available for you. Again, my name is Ashley, so if you have any specific questions that you want to ask later, or if something comes up on your journeys, if you're looking to buy or purchase materials, whether it's scanners or archival documents, or stuff to store your archival documents, please feel free to reach out. Applewood, the Ruth Mott Foundation, we are a resource for you. I will say we're generalists because we have a little bit of everything in the house, but we're happy to do some research and look into it more for you. I'm going to do one more check. Any further questions or discussion? All right, so I am going to ask everyone, there is a survey link up on your screen. This is our first virtual lunch and learn that we've done, but we want to continue doing them, especially as Applewood is closed for the season. We still want to connect with everyone. Please fill out the survey. I believe it will also be emailed to you as well. You only have to fill it out once, but please do it at least once. Thank you all so much for being with us today.
Ashley, a few other quick things. Can you pop that link for the survey in the chat so people can click on it? And then there was also one more additional question about tin types, which I know has some very specific care and handling. It's a little bit different than most home photos that people may have.
Was it just what to do with them?
Yeah, what can be done with them?
So I would say you're going to want to go back to, let's see if I can get back to this slide over here.
I've got one type and one glass negative. Actually, David has them.
All right, so you're going to want to look at a little bit more into stuff. You're not going to want to store these just in plastic sleeves. You would box them up depending on how many you have, how they're, I would have to see them to be more specific, but probably store each individual one in its own materials.
And then one more question that has come in. So there are some photos that have been glued to paper. So is there a way to safely remove those, or should something else be done in that case?
There is not a way to remove it without going to a actual photo conservator. What I would say in that instance, the damage has already been done. And so what you're going to do from here is that paper behind it, what we would do at Applewood is consider that to be a part of the photo now. And so it's, instead of trying to take it apart, when you digitize the whole thing. You can always crop into the smaller part, but when you're storing it in the folders, you're going to store that paper along with it. Excellent. All right, let's see if I can get that link copied over into the chat for you.
Okay.
I think it's right here.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's not in the chat. She hasn't got it there, I guess.
Oh, no, I'm out of it.
Oh, it's being fussy.
Understood.
Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, Ashley, see, I tried to put the link in and the one that I had was not appropriate. So hopefully yours will work better. Mine said that it was not available.
There we go. Okay, that one should work. If not, it will be coming in your email as well, because we do really value your feedback. If there's more information or something that we're missing or topics that you want to see from us in the future, it's a great way to do it. So thank you all so much for being here. We do have our next Bring Your Lunch and Learn, well, Lunch and Learn, because we're not bringing it anywhere. We're just bringing it to the table. Is going to be next month, and that's going to be with Ed Renahan, who was the author of our CS Mott biography, and we're going to be talking about CS and his civic participation. So please check that out. However you heard about us today, we will be posting on our Facebook and on our website as well, the information for that. Thank you all.
Ashley, before we go, one more quick question. So there was a question about the possibility of using undo to remove paper.
I wouldn't. I mean, you can try, they're your own photos. So if you really wanted to, you're more than welcome to try those things. That is not something that we would do in a museum setting. It gets tricky. If you felt comfortable with it, sure. If you think it's going to remove it, I don't see the image in front of me right now, so it might work just fine. But I really, from a museum standpoint, we would send anything, and we have a lot of stuff that's glued and taped back together that we would send out to a conservator.
And also just make sure you have a copy of it before you try anything like that.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all so much. Again, this recording should be available soon. Check out our website and we will post everything there. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Wasn't it the survey?
I think some people are still here trying to get to the survey, so I'm not kicking everyone off.